And bringing it back home here in Nigeria, where the protests have entered its 10th day. Protesters say they are still expecting the president to respond to their agitations. This was after they took to the streets of Lagos on Friday for a candle-lit procession in honor of those killed during recent demonstrations. The protests, using the hashtag #EndBadGovernance, have focused on Nigeria's cost of living crisis and accusations of mismanagement of resources and corruption in Africa's most populous country. Amnesty International says 22 protesters have been killed across 6 states during the demonstrations, citing witness and family accounts, as well as the group's own verification. Protesters called for accountability for the deaths at what they say were peaceful demonstrations.
There are material conditions that have spoiled all this, and it is the fact that Nigerians are hungry. It is the fact that anti-people policies have continued and to push people to death. We say that enough is enough, and governance must reflect the will of the people.
All of those who have been killed across the country in the course of these peaceful protests must also be adequately compensated. And all those who are responsible for those killings must be arrested and tried. We are calling for a democratic public probe into the killings and the clampdown across the country.
By and large, it has been a success. We have made our demands known. We have made our grievances known. Though none of our demands have been met, but of course the struggle will continue and we will not stop until we achieve victory.
Well, to speak on this situation, we are now being joined by the Senior Special Advisor on Digital and New Media to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Ortega Ogra, who will be talking to us about what plan President Tinubu has for Nigerians as a result of the 10-day protests. Good afternoon. It's nice to have you on Newsday.
Good afternoon, Adesua. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega Ogra. Now, what plans does the president have now that we've reached day 10 of the 10 days of the End Bad Governance protest? The president did speak to us a week ago, last Sunday, and he said that this is an era of renewed hope. However, some people are arguing that they do not feel very hopeful. In fact, the protests have been done, the hunger protests, because Nigerians say they are hungry. What ways does the president plan to alleviate hunger, and what new plans does he have that we did not hear about last week, Sunday?
Thank you very much. So I think the most important thing is to realize what it takes to end hunger and guarantee food security in Nigeria. It's not a magic wand. The president has said on countless occasions is not willing to look behind and start to drop blames or whatsoever, but let's situate things properly. At the beginning of last year, we had a Naira redesign. That Naira redesign ensured that a lot of farmers didn't go to farms to go and, to plant and all that. It simply meant we had limited food outputs at the end of last year. But let's put that aside. What is the current government doing to ensure that, Nigerians can eat and food can get, to tables of people, as well as guarantee the long-term food security of Nigerians? The first thing, which the president mentioned in his speech, was ensuring that we could get, equipment, not only, normal equipment, but mechanized tools and equipment which we've ordered from Belarus, Brazil, and the US. Those are already on their way to the country. He also said we cannot use short-term solutions for long-term problems. And we know the problems of food security has bedeviled this country for a very long time. You're seeing the Ministry of Agriculture, besides offering inputs like fertilizers, seeds, agri-extension services, also has the Nigerian Agricultural Development Fund. We've also helped, with ginger virus effects in the northern part of the country. You're also seeing some subnationals. Case in point, Niger and Lagos, either putting in a lot of efforts into the production phase, or in the case of Lagos, putting in a lot of efforts into aggregation, distribution and logistics to ensure that food can get cheaper to the people. So Nigerians need to understand that this is a process. The president has also, opened up the borders for imports of food items, critical food items, for 6 months in the first instance. From grains to other, staples that Nigerians eat. We do hope that these will bear fruits. The customs have said they should start, implementation of that by next week. We do hope a lot of Nigerian businesses will take advantage of that, and that should drive down the cost of food further.
One of the major concerns that have been raised by the protesters is the removal of fuel subsidy. We know that that was one of the policies that the president instituted immediately he took over office. He talked about the removal of the subsidy. What are the measures that the president, we know that the president talked about the policies or the effects, the measures that they have put in place to ensure that the biting hardship in the economy is not felt by Nigerians. But talking about this subsidy removal, what measures, what approach is the president or the government of the day looking at taking to ease the hardship on the people?
Rather than say what measures are we looking at taking, you should actually say what measures has the government taken. I listened to the publisher and owner of Arise TV yesterday, Prince Nduka Ogbeabina, and he re-echoed what almost all Nigerians had echoed prior to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu coming into the presidency, and which is that the subsidies had to go. Now, the question where everybody has had some different opinions has been, could anything have been done prior to that? Now let's look at the history again. Mid-2021, the federal government then, under President Muhammadu Buhari, wanted to remove the subsidies because it had become unsustainable. The government couldn't pay for it anymore. But Nigerians complained, and it was moved to end of 2021. As of November, the government then said it would leave the subsidies for 18 months up until the mid last year. And, they budgeted for it up to then. At the beginning of the year, the budget was approved, and they budgeted for subsidies up until the point at which President Bola Ahmed Tinubu removed it, or made the pronouncement that subsidies are gone. So legally, because the government, as in the National Assembly, didn't make provisions in the budgets for subsidies beyond that day, legally the subsidies had to end. Also, $400 million and 700 billion naira borrowed every month for subsidies was not a bill Nigeria could continue to fund, simply because Nigeria had already started using 98% of every single kobo it's made, to service its debts, not even to pay back, just to service those debts. We got to a point as of when we came in that the government was facing, a sort of bankruptcy. We couldn't have paid staff salaries, government employee salaries as at that point in time.
Sorry,
so Nigeria was faced with a clear and present danger.
I'd like to come in here actually, because you're talking about bankruptcy, you're talking about difficulty in paying even staff salaries. However, people have been arguing.
I had to situate the facts first.
Yes, but I want to just hone in on that point.
I had to situate the facts first.
I want to hone in on that point because people have been complaining about the size of the president's cabinet. They have been complaining about the number of ministers. They have been complaining that the federal government is not leading by example, that if you want us to believe that the government cannot afford certain things, then why do we have such a large cabinet? Why do we have new ministries? So what do you say to those who say that the government is not leading by example?
So look at this from a two-pronged approach. The first things first is the number of ministers, the minimum number of ministers Nigeria can have is set by law. It's in the Constitution. Every state of the Federation has to have a minister. That makes at least 37 ministers. But I am personally, it's my personal opinion that sometimes you cannot cut your way, to progress. There are some ministries that the president felt for them to be more efficient, for the dividends of those ministries to reach the people more, then they needed to create new ministries so that they could be more effective in their service, output to the people. And that is why you have more ministries. Yes, there are times you have to cut things in order to ensure that you save costs, but there are also times that you have to expand to ensure that, you are more effective, more efficient, and can, deliver service. Now back to the, what's the president has been doing in terms of, alleviating the pains from this fuel subsidy removal. The first thing the president did was to introduce the presidential CNG initiative. And what that had to do was to ensure that we moved from our reliance on, PMS, which is rightly called premium motor spirits, premium there due to the high cost normally across the world, to something that Nigeria had in abundance, and Nigeria has, we haven't even explored 70% of our resources, which is gas. CNG is safer, it's cheaper, and it's more readily available for us as a country. So what we had to do was build a framework to ensure that we could bring CNG kits, convert as many commercial vehicles as possible, and also remove duties on the importation of CNG kits, CNG equipment, CNG vehicles, as well as electric vehicles into Nigeria. So far, almost $800 billion, of equipment, vehicles, or whatsoever have applied to take advantage of this removal of duties. And today I posted something on my Instagram. You're seeing a lot of, commercial vehicle owners, from the kekes in the north to Danfo drivers, which is the small commercial vehicles, all trying to switch to CNG. And it's not only on the consumer side. On the infrastructural side, we're seeing, a lot of CNG stations popping up. I've had, we've had user case stories from people like truck owners who have, embraced CNG and can then take their trucks with goods from a Lagos or a Benin to Abuja and back on a single tank of CNG. That is something that should be commendable. Secondly, for the next 3 years,
Mr. Ogra, before you go ahead, let me just butt in here on the CNG transition and all of that. There have been a lot of questions as regards this transitioning from the premium motor spirit that you talked about into CNG. The practicality of the transitioning and also the affordability have been questioned, as the accessibility also when it comes to these vehicles getting the CNG, also the safety. All of these questions have been at the front burner when it comes to transitioning from PMS to CNG.
Thank you very much. So on the safety issue, you have the Standards Organization of Nigeria and other relevant safety organizations, vetting and verifying every single CNG kit that is imported into this country. Secondly, in the terms of use of CNG versus PMS, CNG is actually safer, to use as a fuel for your vehicle. It's way safer, it's been established, it's been proven, and it's also cheaper. So you're talking about the cost of converting your cars. You can either decide to have a new CNG car, or you can decide, to convert your car. Looking at the cost for commercial vehicles like your taxis, your kekes, your trucks, doing haulage and all that, the government is subsidizing or giving it for free, at almost €0, to those categories of, citizens. However, if you decide as a private citizen, I want to go and convert myself, I know the cost is about 1.3 to 1.4 million. You look at the costs, that is not, if you're not using the government's own initiative, you look at the costs for a 4,000 naira full tank of fuel, that is comparable to 2.5 tanks of, 40,000, a 4,000 naira full tank of CNG is comparable to 2.5 tanks of full tanks of 40,000, naira each of PMS. The cost pays itself off over time. If you're going to be saving about, let me say, 96,000 naira on 2.5 tanks of fuel, just in favor of 1 tank of CNG, and it's doing the same job, I don't see how you shouldn't embrace it. It's easier, it's cheaper, it's safer, and I want to use this opportunity to encourage a lot of people to switch to CNG.
Well, we hope that this has been communicated as much as possible, because you are talking about it here. You make it as simple as it can be. But how many people have this information? But let's talk about all of the other demands that protesters have been raising.
Quite a number of people do. Like I told you earlier, you have a lot of commercial vehicles already, switching to CNG from the regular Danfos on the street. So maybe it's an elite issue of people not really knowing about it, but I'm sure the Presidential CNG Initiative will take it as a challenge to improve their comms in that area.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Ortega Ogra, for joining us on Newsday today. It's been lovely having you on the show. Well, it's time now for a short break, so do stay with us. Many more still.